The planet HFY had been burning for 11 days. Smoke rose from the cities, like dark fingers reaching toward the sky. Buildings that once stood tall and beautiful now lay in ruins. The Valorian people ran through the streets, screaming, crying, searching for family members they would never find again. Ambassador HFY stood at the top of a broken tower. Her silver skin was covered in ash and burns. Her forearms hung at her sides, trembling from exhaustion and fear. She had not slept in 3 days. She had not eaten in 2. All around her, she could hear the sounds of her world dying. The Valorians had always been a peaceful species. They believed that violence was wrong. They believed that intelligent beings should solve their problems with words, not weapons. For thousands of years, they had built their civilization on this idea. They created art, music, and philosophy. They studied the stars and wrote poetry about the beauty of the universe. They never built a single weapon. When humanity first joined the Galactic Collective 50 years ago, the Valorians had laughed at them. Humans were loud and aggressive. They solved problems with their fists. They built warships and trained soldiers. The Valorians called them primitives. They called them savages. They said that humans were proof that some species never truly evolved. Now the Dremok horde had come to the HFY, and all that philosophy meant nothing. The Dremok were conquerors. They traveled from world to world, taking what they wanted and destroying everything else. Their ships filled the sky above the HFY like a dark cloud. Their soldiers marched through the streets, killing anyone they found. They did not want peace. They did not want to talk. They wanted only death. HFY watched a Dremok warship fly over the city. It fired its weapons into a building where she knew hundreds of her people were hiding. The building exploded. She heard the screams, and then she heard nothing at all. She turned away and walked to the emergency communication room. The equipment was old and damaged, but it still worked. She had been sending messages for days, calling for help from anyone who would listen. The Andrade Empire said they were neutral. They would not get involved. The Morvic Federation said they were too far away. They sent their deepest sympathy. The Zelian Council said they were very concerned. They promised to discuss the matter at their next meeting. No one came. No one helped. The galaxy watched the HFY burn and did nothing. HFY sat down at the communication console. Her hand shook as she typed. She did not know what else to say. She had begged. She had pleaded. She had offered everything her people had. Nothing worked. She opened a channel to all frequencies. Her voice was hoarse and broken when she spoke. This is Ambassador HFY of the HFY. We are dying. The Dremok are killing our children. Our cities are gone. We have no weapons. We never built weapons. Please, anyone, if you can hear this message, we need help. We will give you anything. We will do anything. Please, please help us. She ended the transmission and put her head in her hands. Tears ran down her silver cheeks. She had sent the same message 147 times. No one ever answered. Then the console beeped. She looked up, not believing what she was hearing. Someone was responding. She pressed the button to receive the transmission, and a voice filled the room. It was rough and direct, speaking in the human language that she had learned years ago, but rarely used. The HFY, this is Captain Danny Ortega of the human vessel Defiant Hope. We picked up your signal. We're coming. 3 days out. Can you hold on? HFY could not speak. Her throat closed up and more tears fell from her eyes. A human ship. The primitives. The savages. They were the only ones who answered. Ambassador, are you there? Can you hear me? She found her voice. Yes, I hear you. Captain, the Dremok have 300 ships. How many do you have? There was a pause. 5. 5? "Captain, that is not enough. You will die." "Maybe, but we're coming anyway. We heard you calling for help." That's all we needed to hear. HFY did not understand. "Why? We're not your allies. We have never been kind to your species. Why would you risk your lives for us?" The human captain laughed softly. It was a warm sound, not cruel or mocking. "Because you asked. That's how it works with us. Someone calls for help, we answer. Doesn't matter who they are or what they said about us before. You're in trouble and you need someone. We're that someone. But you cannot win against 300 ships. We're not trying to win, Ambassador. We're trying to give you a chance. We're bringing Marines. Ground troops. They'll drop onto your planet and start getting your people out. We'll hold the Dramok off as long as we can. After that, well, we'll see what happens." HFY thought about the stories she had heard about humans. Stories about their wars, their violence, their endless fighting. But she had also heard other stories. Stories about humans running into burning buildings to save strangers. Stories about human soldiers carrying wounded enemies to safety. Stories about humans giving their lives for people they had never met. She had dismissed those stories as lies. No species could be that selfless and that violent at the same time. It did not make sense. Now she was not so sure. "Captain Ortega," she said slowly, "my people have been unfair to yours. We judged you without understanding you. I am sorry. Don't worry about it. You can apologize properly after we get you out of there. For now, just stay alive. Find somewhere safe and keep your people hidden. We're coming." The transmission ended. HFY sat in the silence of the ruined room, listening to the distant sounds of explosions and screams. 3 days. She had to keep her people alive for 3 more days. She stood up and walked to the door. She had work to do. Somewhere in this burning city, there were Valorians still hiding, still hoping for rescue. She would find them. She would keep them safe. And when the humans arrived, she would show them that their sacrifice was not wasted. Outside, the sky was red with fire. But for the first time in 11 days, HFY felt something she had forgotten. She felt hope. The humans were coming. The loud ones. The angry ones. The primitives who never learned to stop fighting. Maybe that was exactly what her people needed. Warlord Vashrik stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the destruction of Desert with satisfaction. His forces had conquered 47 worlds. He had never lost a battle. The Valorians were weak and pathetic, unable to fight back against his armies. This conquest was almost too easy. His censor officer made a small sound of surprise. Vashrik turned his massive head toward the officer. "What is it?" "Ships dropping out of hyperspace, Warlord. 5 vessels. Human design." Vashrik laughed. It was a harsh, grinding sound like metal scraping against stone. 5 ships? Against my fleet of 300? He walked to the viewing screen and looked at the tiny human vessels. They were small, battered, and clearly outgunned. "Ignore them. They are no threat. Continue the ground assault. I want every Valorian on this planet dead by morning." Far below, in the burning capital city of Desert Prime, the Valorian survivors huddled in the ruins of their homes. Ambassador HFY had gathered as many as she could find in an underground shelter. There were almost 2,000 of them now, mostly children and elderly. They had no food, little water, and no way to defend themselves. Above them, Dramok soldiers marched through the streets. Their armor was thick and black, designed to stop any weapon. Their weapons fired plasma bolts that could burn through steel. They moved in organized squads, searching every building, killing anyone they found. Then the sky began to scream. Everyone looked up, even the Dramok soldiers. Bright lights were falling from the clouds, moving fast, trailing fire behind them. At first, It looked like meteors. Then the Valorians realized what they were. Drop pods. Hundreds of them. The pods hit the ground hard, smashing into streets and crashing through ruined buildings. Each impact sent up a cloud of dust and debris. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then the hatches blew open. Sergeant Katie Reyes was the first one out of her pod. She was not a tall woman. She stood only 5 feet and 4 inches, but she moved with the confidence of someone who had seen many battles. Her armor was covered in scratches and burns from previous fights. She carried a rifle that was almost as long as she was tall. Behind her came her squad. Corporal Marcus Webb was a big man with dark skin and a shaved head. He had grown up on the streets of Chicago and joined the Marines at 18. Private First Class Tyler Grant was young, only 23, with red hair and freckles. He was always smiling, even in the worst situations. Lance Corporal Amanda Vance was quiet and serious, with short blonde hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. There were 17 other Marines in the squad. They had all volunteered for this mission. They all knew they would probably die. Contact left. Marcus shouted. Katie turned and saw a Dremok soldier coming through the smoke. He was huge, almost 8 feet tall, covered in black armor that was supposed to be impossible to break. He raised his weapon and fired. Katie was faster. She pulled the trigger twice. Her rifle fired tungsten core rounds, bullets made from the heaviest metal humans could find. These bullets were designed specifically to break through armor that other species thought was unbeatable. The first round cracked the Dremok's chest plate. The second round went through the crack and into his body. He fell. Move. Katie ordered. The squad spread out through the ruins. All around them, other Marine squads were doing the same thing. They moved quickly and carefully, searching for survivors, fighting Dremok soldiers whenever they found them. Katie heard a child scream somewhere ahead. She ran toward the sound without thinking. A Dremok soldier had cornered a group of Valorian children in an alley. They were crying and holding each other, too afraid to move. The soldier raised his weapon. Katie slammed into him from the side. She was much smaller than him, but she hit him with all her strength and knocked him off balance. Before he could recover, she pressed her rifle against the weak point in his armor, right under his arm, and fired. He fell. Katie stood over his body, breathing hard. Then she turned to the children. "It's okay," she said softly. "It's okay now. We're here to help." The children stared at her with huge silver eyes. They did not understand her words, but they understood her tone. One of them, a small girl no older than 5 or 6, reached out and took Katie's hand. "Come on," Katie said. "Let's get you somewhere safe." She led the children back toward the main group. On the way, she met Tyler and Amanda. They were carrying wounded Valorians on their backs. Marcus was covering them, firing at Dremok soldiers who tried to stop them. "How many have we got?" Katie asked. 37 so far," Marcus replied. "More coming in from other squads." "Not enough. There are thousands of civilians in this city. We need to move faster." A plasma bolt flew past her head, so close she felt the heat on her cheek. She turned and saw a squad of Dremok soldiers advancing toward them. There were at least 20 of them. "Get the civilians out of here," Katie ordered. "I'll hold them off." "Like hell you will," Marcus said. He stepped up beside her and raised his rifle. "We do this together." Tyler and Amanda guided the civilians away while Katie and Marcus opened fire. The Dremok charged at them, and the Marines did not retreat. They stood their ground and kept shooting. 3 Dremok fell, then 5, then 8. But more kept coming. Marcus took a plasma bolt to his leg. He went down on one knee but kept firing. "I'm fine," he said through gritted teeth. "Don't stop." Katie emptied her magazine and slammed in a new one without pausing. Her arms were tired. Her body ached, but she did not stop. Finally, the last Dremok fell. The street was silent, except for the distant sounds of fighting from other parts of the city. Katie helped Marcus to his feet. His leg was badly burned, but he could still walk. They moved to catch up with the others. "Why do we do this?" Tyler asked as they walked. He was carrying a Valorian elder on his back, an old man who weighed almost nothing. "These people, they always hated us, called us savages, and now we're dying for them." Katie thought about the question for a moment. "Because they needed help," she said finally. "That's reason enough. That's it. That's the whole reason? What other reason do you need?" Tyler did not have an answer for that. He just nodded and kept walking. Behind them, more drop pods were falling from the sky. More Marines were coming. The battle for Desert 4 had only just begun. In orbit above Desert 4, Captain Danny Ortega watched the battle unfold on his tactical display. His 5 ships were surrounded by the Dremok fleet. Every few seconds, another alarm went off. Another system failed. Another section of his ship took damage. The Defiant Hope was an old ship. Danny had commanded her for 12 years. He knew every sound she made, every vibration in her hull. Right now, she was screaming. "Shields at 30%, his tactical officer reported. Ensign Megan Torres was young, only 25, but she had steady hands and a calm voice. "We've lost 2 engine pods. Hull breach on deck 7. What about the others?" "Iron Dawn has lost starboard thrusters. She's drifting. Last Stand is venting atmosphere from 3 decks. Morning Light and Silent Runner are still fighting, but they can't take much more." Danny nodded. He had expected this. 5 ships against 300 was not a fair fight. It was never meant to be a fair fight. They were here to buy time, nothing more. "Sir," Megan said, "we're being hailed by the Dremok fleet commander." "Put him through." The view screen flickered, and Warlord Voshrik appeared. He was laughing, his massive jaw open wide to show rows of sharp teeth. "Human Captain," Voshrik said, "I wanted to see your face before you die. Tell me, why are you doing this? These Valorians are not your friends. They called your species primitives. They mocked you in every council meeting. And now you die for them? Why?" Danny looked at the warlord for a long moment. "Because they asked for help." Voshrik stopped laughing. "That is your reason? That is why you throw away your lives?" "That's always been our reason." "You are insane. Your entire species is insane." "Maybe, but we're still here. And we're not leaving." Danny cut the transmission. He turned back to his crew. Everyone was looking at him, waiting for orders. They all knew they were going to die. None of them looked afraid. "All hands," Danny said. "This is the captain. We knew what we were getting into when we came here. We knew the odds. We came anyway because someone needed us. Down on that planet, our Marines are pulling civilians out of the fire. Every minute we stay alive is another minute they have to save someone. So we're going to stay alive as long as we can. That's our job. That's what we do." He paused and looked around the bridge. "It's been an honor serving with all of you. Now let's get back to work." The crew turned back to their stations. The battle continued. On the surface of Desert 4, Sergeant Katie Reyes led her squad through the burning streets of Desert Prime. They had gathered almost 300 Valorian civilians now. The group moved slowly because many of them were injured or elderly. Children cried. Parents carried babies in their arms. Old people leaned on each other for support. Katie's radio crackled. It was Captain Ortega's voice. "All Marine units, this is Defiant Hope. Fleet's getting hit hard up here. We'll hold as long as we can, but I don't know how much time we can give you. Get those civilians to the extraction zone." "That's an order." "Copy that," Katie replied. She looked at her squad. "You heard the captain. We need to move faster." Marcus was limping badly now. His leg wound was getting worse, but he refused to stop. "I'm fine," he said whenever anyone asked. "Worry about the civilians." They moved through the ruins of what had once been a beautiful park. The trees were burned. The fountains were broken. Statues lay shattered on the ground. A Valorian child walked beside Katie, holding her hand tightly. The girl had been separated from her parents during the attack. She had not spoken since Katie found her. "What's your name?" Katie asked gently. The girl looked up at her. "Ilya," she whispered. "That's a pretty name." "I'm Katie. I'm going to keep you safe, okay?" Ilya nodded. Then she asked the question that Katie had heard a dozen times already. "Why do you help us?" Katie thought about how to explain it in simple words. Because that's what humans do. When someone needs help, we help them. It doesn't matter if they're our friends or not. It doesn't matter if we might get hurt. We help because it's the right thing to do. Even if you die? Even if we die. Ilya was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My mother told me humans were bad. She said you were violent and dangerous. Your mother wasn't wrong. We are violent. We are dangerous. But we're not bad. We just use our violence to protect people who can't protect themselves." They reached an intersection and stopped. Ahead of them, Katie could see a Dramok patrol. There were at least 30 soldiers blocking the way to the extraction zone. "We can't go through them," Tyler said. "Not with all these civilians." Katie looked around. There was a narrow alley to the left that might work, but it would take them too close to a building that looked ready to collapse. "We'll go around," she decided. "Amanda, take point. Marcus, watch our backs. Everyone else, keep the civilians moving and quiet." They started down the alley. The ruined building loomed over them, groaning in the wind. Pieces of stone fell from its walls. Katie kept her eyes on it, ready to react if it collapsed. They were halfway through when the Dramok found them. Soldiers appeared at both ends of the alley. They had walked into a trap. The civilians screamed and pushed together in the middle, trying to get away from the enemy on both sides. "Tyler, Amanda, hold the rear," Katie shouted. "Marcus, with me." The firefight was brutal. In the narrow alley, there was nowhere to hide. Katie shot 2 Dramok soldiers before they could fire. Marcus got 3 more. But they kept coming. A plasma bolt hit Tyler in the chest. He fell backward, his eyes wide with surprise. Amanda caught him before he hit the ground. "Tyler!" She screamed. Katie saw it happen but could not stop. More Dramok were coming. She kept shooting, kept fighting, kept pushing forward. Behind her, she heard Amanda crying. She heard the civilians screaming. She heard Marcus shouting something she could not understand. Then, suddenly, it was over. The last Dramok fell. The alley was silent except for the sound of Amanda sobbing. Katie ran back to Tyler. She knelt beside him and looked at his wound. The plasma bolt had gone straight through his armor. There was nothing anyone could do. Tyler looked up at her and tried to smile. "Did we get them all?" "Yeah," Katie said. Her voice was shaking. "We got them all." "Good." He closed his eyes. "Tell my mom. Tell her I was brave." "You were," Katie said. "You were the bravest." Tyler stopped breathing. Amanda held his hand and cried. The civilians watched in silence, not understanding what was happening but knowing somehow that something terrible had just occurred. Katie stood up slowly. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were burning. But she did not have time to grieve. "Not yet. We keep moving," she said. "We have to keep moving." They left Tyler's body in the alley and continued toward the extraction zone. Behind them, the building finally collapsed. burying the fallen Dremok soldiers and the young Marine who had given his life for people he had never met. The Defiant Hope was dying. Captain Danny Ortega could feel it in the way the ship moved, in the sounds coming from the walls, in the flickering lights and failing systems. They had been fighting for 6 hours. 2 of his 5 ships were gone. The Morning Light had been destroyed 3 hours ago. The Silent Runner followed an hour later. Now only the Defiant Hope, the Iron Dawn, and the Last Stand remained. "Shields are gone," Megan Torres reported. Her voice was calm, but Danny could see the fear in her eyes. "Hull integrity at 40%. We've lost contact with decks 4 through 9. How many crew did we lose?" "At least 200, sir. Maybe more." Danny closed his eyes for a moment. 200 people. 200 families who would receive the worst news of their lives. And for what? A planet full of aliens who had never shown humanity anything but contempt? He opened his eyes and looked at the tactical display. The Dremok fleet was moving to surround his remaining ships. It would be over soon. But on the planet below, his Marines were still fighting. They were still saving people. Every minute he stayed alive was another minute they had to work. "Sir," Megan suddenly shouted. New contacts dropping out of hyperspace. Danny looked at the display. His heart stopped. A massive ship appeared behind the Dremok fleet. It was bigger than anything Danny had ever seen. It was the Titan's Wrath, the largest warship humanity had ever built. And behind it came more ships. 10, 20, 30, 47 human warships in total, all dropping out of hyperspace at the same moment. "Message coming in," Megan said. She was crying now, tears running down her cheeks. "It's Commander Lisa Park of the Titan's Wrath." Danny opened the channel. "Commander Park, you have no idea how good it is to see you. Captain Ortega." Lisa's voice was calm and steady. "Sorry, we're late. Traffic was bad. We're taking over now. All ships, weapons free. Light them up." The human fleet attacked. Warlord Voshrik watched in horror as his tactical display turned red. Human ships were everywhere, firing weapons that should not exist. The Galactic Collective had banned these weapons years ago. They were too destructive, too dangerous, too cruel. Humanity had signed the treaty, agreeing to never build them. Humanity had lied. Missiles streaked across the void, each one carrying enough explosive power to destroy a small moon. Energy beams cut through Dremok ships like knives through paper. The human vessels did not fight like other species. They did not keep their distance. They did not try to preserve themselves. They charged straight into the Dremok formation, taking hits that would have destroyed any other fleet, and kept firing. "Retreat!" Voshrik screamed. "All ships retreat." But it was too late. The human fleet had surrounded them. There was nowhere to run. On the surface of Desert, Sergeant Katie Reyes heard the news on her radio. Reinforcements had arrived. The Dremok fleet was being destroyed. They just had to hold on a little longer. "Did you hear that?" she said to her squad. "Help is here. We just need to get these people to the extraction zone." They were so close now. Katie could see the landing area just a few hundred meters ahead. Human transport ships were already touching down, their ramps open, crews ready to load civilians. All they had to do was cross one more open area. The Dremok were waiting for them. 100 soldiers stood between Katie's group and safety. They had formed a defensive line, their weapons aimed at the approaching civilians. Behind them, more soldiers were arriving every minute. The Dremok knew they were losing in space. They wanted to do as much damage as possible before the end. Katie looked at her squad. They were exhausted. Marcus could barely stand. Amanda had not spoken since Tyler died. The other Marines were wounded, tired, and running low on ammunition. But none of them hesitated. We go through them, Katie said. We clear a path for the civilians. Whatever it takes. Marcus nodded. Whatever it takes. They attacked. Katie led the charge, firing as she ran. The Dreamhawk fired back, and the air filled with plasma bolts and bullets. Marines fell. Dreamhawk fell. The ground became covered with bodies. Amanda took a plasma bolt to the shoulder, but kept fighting. She shot 3 Dreamhawk soldiers before another bolt hit her in the chest. She fell and did not get up. Marcus dragged himself forward on his wounded leg, shooting with one hand while pulling himself along with the other. He killed 4 Dreamhawk before a blade found his throat. He died with his rifle still in his hand. Katie fought like a person possessed. She was no longer thinking. She was just moving, shooting, killing. A Dreamhawk soldier hit her with the back of his weapon, and she felt her ribs crack. She shot him in the face and kept moving. Another soldier stabbed her in the arm. She dropped her rifle, pulled out her pistol, and shot him 3 times. The path was clear. The civilians ran toward the transport ships, screaming, crying, stumbling over the bodies of fallen Marines and Dreamhawk soldiers. Katie stood in the middle of the carnage, bleeding from a dozen wounds, watching the Valorians escape. Her vision was getting dark around the edges. Her legs were shaking, but she did not fall. Not yet. A transport ship landed beside her. A medic jumped out and ran toward her. Sergeant, we need to get you on board. The civilians first, Katie said. Her voice was barely a whisper. Make sure they all get on. They're on. They're all on. Now it's your turn. The medic grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the ship. Katie took one step, then another. Behind her, more transport ships were landing, loading the last of the survivors and taking off again. Above, she could see the flashes of the space battle. Human ships were winning. The Dreamhawk were dying. She collapsed just inside the transport. The medic shouted something, but Katie could not hear him anymore. She was too tired, too hurt, too empty. She thought about Tyler and his smile. She thought about Marcus and his stubbornness. She thought about Amanda and her quiet strength. They were gone. So many of her people were gone, but the Valorians were safe. The mission was complete. As the transport lifted off, Katie let herself close her eyes. She had done her job. She had protected the people who needed protecting. That was all that mattered. The last thing she heard before she lost consciousness was a Valorian child crying somewhere in the ship. It was a sad sound, but also a beautiful one. It was the sound of someone who was still alive. 3 days after the battle, Warlord Voshreck was dragged onto the bridge of the Titan's Wrath in chains. His armor had been stripped away. His weapons were gone. He looked small now, smaller than he had ever looked before. Captain Danny Ortega stood waiting for him. Danny was covered in bandages. His arm was in a sling. A cut on his forehead had been stitched closed. But he was alive. Somehow, against all odds, he was alive. Commander Lisa Park stood beside him. She had commanded the relief fleet that turned the battle. Without her, Danny and everyone else would be dead. Voshreck looked at the 2 humans with hatred in his eyes. You are fools, he snarled. You lost thousands of soldiers for these Valorians. Your ships are damaged. Your people are dead. And for what? For them, Danny said simply. They are not worth it. They are weak. They cannot fight. They cannot defend themselves. Why would you sacrifice so much for a species like that? Danny stepped closer to the warlord. He was not a big man, but in that moment, he seemed to tower over the massive Dreamhawk warrior. Because they asked for help, Danny said. That's it. That's the only reason we need. Someone calls for help, we answer. Someone is hurting, we try to stop it. Someone is dying, we try to save them. That's who we are. That's who we've always been. Vashrik stared at him. You are insane. Your entire species is insane. Maybe, Danny agreed. But we're the ones standing here. And you're the one in chains. He turned away from the warlord. Taken to the brig. The Galactic Collective can't decide what to do with him. 2 guards led Vashrik away. He went quietly, but Danny could still hear him muttering to himself. Insane. They are all insane. Maybe they were. Danny did not care. On the surface of Thesophoor, the recovery effort had begun. Human engineering teams worked day and night to put out the fires, clear the rubble, and rebuild what they could. Medical ships orbited the planet, treating the wounded. Supply ships brought food, water, and medicine. Thousands of Valorians had died in the attack, but tens of thousands had survived. They were alive because humans had come when no one else would. Ambassador SmokeHFY walked through the ruins of Thesser Prime. The city was unrecognizable. The beautiful towers were gone. The parks were burned. The streets were filled with broken stone and ash. But everywhere she looked, she saw humans working alongside her people, carrying supplies, treating the injured, holding the hands of frightened children. She found Sergeant Katie Reyes sitting on a broken wall near what used to be the central plaza. The human soldier was covered in bandages. Her arm was wrapped in white cloth. Her face was bruised and cut. But she was alive. Katie looked up as SmokeHFY approached. She tried to stand, but her legs would not support her. Please, SmokeHFY said. Do not stand. You have done enough. She sat down beside the human soldier. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They just watched the sunrise together. It was the first clear sunrise since the attack began. Sergeant Reyes, SmokeHFY finally said, I do not know how to thank you. My people treated yours with contempt. We called you primitives. We said you were not civilized. And yet, you came. You died for us. Katie looked at her. Yeah, why? I have asked this question many times, but I still do not understand. Why would you sacrifice so much for people who showed you nothing but disrespect? Katie was quiet for a moment. She seemed to be thinking about how to answer. When I was a little girl, she said slowly, my house caught fire. I was trapped in my bedroom. I couldn't get out. I thought I was going to die. Then a firefighter broke down my door. He carried me out through the flames. He didn't know me. He didn't know my family. He just knew that someone was in trouble and he could help. She paused and looked out at the ruined city. I asked him later why he did it, why he risked his life for a stranger. You know what he said? He said, that's just what we do. Someone needs help. We help them. That's it. Katie turned back to SmokeHFY. That's who we are, Ambassador. We're the species that runs into burning buildings. We're the species that fights when the odds are impossible. We're the species that hears a stranger crying for help and says, we're coming. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what you said about us. When you needed someone, we were there. SmokeHFY felt tears running down her silver cheeks. But so many of your people died. I know. Katie's voice was soft. I lost friends here. Good people. People who had families and dreams and whole lives ahead of them. They're gone now, and I miss them. Do you regret coming? Katie shook her head. No, they wouldn't have regretted it either. We knew what we were getting into. We knew the risks. And we came anyway because that's what Marines do. That's what humans do. She reached out and took SmokeHFY's hand. The ambassador's skin was soft and cool. Katie's hand was rough and calloused. You called us primitives, Katie said. And maybe we are. We haven't figured out how to stop fighting. We still solve problems with violence. We're loud and aggressive. Sometimes we do terrible things. But we also haven't figured out how to hear someone screaming for help and just walk away. She looked at Kethra with tired eyes. Other species talk about being civilized, about being evolved, about being above violence. But when your world was burning, where were they? Kethra had no answer. We're not perfect, Katie continued. We're not even close to perfect. But when the smoke clears and the fire burns and innocent people are dying, we're the ones who walk through it. That's who we are. That's who we've always been. She squeezed Kethra's hand gently. Welcome to knowing humans, Ambassador. We're not pretty, but we're here. Kethra looked at the human soldier for a long time. Then she did something that Valorians rarely did with other species. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against Katie's in the traditional gesture of deep respect and gratitude. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for saving my people. Katie closed her eyes. You're welcome. They sat together on the broken wall as the sun rose over the ruined city. Behind them, humans and Valorians worked side by side to rebuild. Above them, human ships patrolled the sky, keeping watch for any remaining threats. The galaxy would remember what happened on Nestor. They would remember the day when aliens cried for aid and human marines walked through the smoke. They would remember the sacrifices made by people like Tyler and Marcus and Amanda, who gave everything so that strangers could live. And maybe, just maybe, they would finally understand what it meant to be human, though not perfect. Not always kind, not always wise, but always there when someone needed help. That was the human way. That was who they were, and that would never change.